So Langers, things going pretty good in the world rocket pool. Anything you want to start us off with before we kind of dive in bi-weekly?
It's very busy. it's very very busy, which is good. I think there's a things are being it's very productive at the moment. Just on getting everything kind of sorted with Saturn and all that sort of thing. But yeah, no, it's good. Yeah, good discussions. Good. We're making progress with a lot of things, so it's yeah, that's good. Enjoying it so far.
Oh, good. Yeah, it does. It does seem to be in kind of that witching hour where you're kind of wrapping up the tail ends of Houston, right? At the same time, I saw that you were very active, and we'll get to it in the biweekly, but very active about the tokenomic design and kind of Saturn One design. So I'm looking forward to today's call where maybe you can share a little bit more about that and how it's kind of panning out here. But let's maybe start with the biweekly here. As always, Mav always provides an update on just kind of the overall protocol health, and so he's noted in here that the rETH supply has declined slightly by about 0.2%. The pending active mini pool count also declined a little bit, very much consistent with that by about 0.3%. But on the positive side, our node operator count increased by 0.2%. So it does seem to be we're kind of in that stagnation area, right? Where sometimes our node operator count increases, sometimes our RE supply decreases, but we're really much, I think, limited by the perhaps the capital assets of our node operators, and hence the reason so much for the focus on the new tokenomic design and the next protocol update of Saturn. Langers, any comments about just those overall numbers or your thoughts on the trajectory or the growth of the protocol?
Yeah, I think it's kind of just cruising along. We're not really kind of like growing. We're not shrinking by that much necessarily. So it is kind of just going sideways. Um, I think there's a lot of stuff going on in terms of what the future looks like. Maybe that's playing into it a little bit. There are other things in the ecosystem that are kind of taking mind share and all that sort of stuff as usual. People tend to follow the shiny lights. But yeah, no, I mean it's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, we've probably reached a bit of an equilibrium at this point in time. But obviously, with the new things coming on the horizon, we can see that hopefully growing in the near future.
Yeah, excellent. The next thing that Mav included in this week's biweekly was that Smart Node version 1.13.7 was released, and we've had a lot of these. I think they're minor releases. The .7 now that's on there. As this one is a recommended update, as it does contain a number of client updates and bug fixes. But I guess a question for you, Langers, unless you want to comment on that release specifically, is just we'd always kind of intended to take version one through Houston, right? We didn't want to deploy a contract and a new smart time. But I know we've also got version two out there. And maybe you want to take a little bit of time and kind of tell us what you're thinking about how long we're going to keep version one out there and when we'll make the transition to version two, or what's your kind of plan on that?
So the idea is to not have them running too long side by side, because maintaining two lots of client is quite difficult from a maintenance perspective. So the idea is to transition over quite quickly. We just needed to. So at the moment we are getting version two. There was some features in version. So version two didn't have quite all the features of version one yet. So we've been porting over, so mainly around like the PDAL voting stuff. So we have been porting that over to V2. So I think we're almost at like parity now with V1 and V2. Once that's kind of the case, then we'll put some more kind of, that will be like a complete beta, and we'll be able to put it out to people. Then once we've had a little bit of a beta time, we can then make it an RC release candidate, and then we'll make it live. The timing of that, I'm not 100% sure, but within like the next few weeks is kind of the aim, is to kind of have that transitioning to that 2v2 over that time. So as I said, we're getting it code complete. We're doing some internal testing on it this week, and well, actually today, a little bit today, but mostly next week, so that we can just make sure we don't have any obvious kind of bugs and that sort of thing, and then we'll throw it to the beta testers for another. I think we're on beta. The next one will be beta 4 or something like that. And then once we've done that, we can start to release an RC, which would be it would be fine to be running on mainnet, but obviously we want to kind of control that a little bit, so that we make sure that there's no major issues. Well, not there wouldn't be any major issues by that point, but we'll be ironing out any other issues post beta, and then we'll actually officially launch it as the official thing. So from a V1 perspective, going forward, so I think from basically this last release, version 1 will only have kind of like critical updates applied to it, and like client updates applied to it. So essentially, we're feature freezing version 1, so that we can concentrate on the transition to V2.
Okay, yeah, perfect. And I know you didn't want to kind of put a time frame on it, but just are we, would you feel good about like August or September, or like any? It sounds like it's a nearer time horizon rather than a later one, but care to make any predictions or no?
Yeah, August definitely seems possible. We're like, I think we'll probably be in a really good spot in the next couple of weeks, to make a call on when we can make that transition. But August seems definitely possible to me.
Okay, excellent. The next section in the biweekly was the R&D, and it's broken down into 2 parts. The first part is Houston, and Mav mentioned that the team is focusing on the contract bug fix and snapshot testing and improvements. You want to just remind us what the bug fix is and kind of what the plans are for implementing that fix, and maybe walk us through a little bit about what we need for snapshot testing, and what percentage you actually want to see before we go live with on-chain voting.
Yeah, so there's going to be a bug fix release which we're preparing at the moment. The main bug fix was, so it affects kind of people on like older delegates, so like the 16th delegate. So what it kind of means is that if you exit your mini pools, it kind of corrupts some data, and so what we've done is, and that this is a consequence of launching Houston, but what we've done in the smart node, we've released kind of a workaround. So to avoid, so what it does is it corrupts some data, and essentially what it means is you might not be able to exit those mini pools until we kind of like fix the data. So we don't want that necessarily. So in the smart node, it actually stops you from exiting mini pools if you're on a 16 mini pool, unless you've initialized your voting power. If you initialize your voting power, everything's fine. It's just the way that this particular bug manifests itself. The workaround basically is that you need to initialize your voting power before you exit those 16 ETH mini pools. And so the idea there is smart node actually will stop you from exiting before initializing your voting power, so you don't get into that state in the first place. But obviously we don't want that kind of like hanging around. So we'd rather kind of like fix it outright, because that's just kind of like a band-aid essentially. So we've got a contract fix that Kane has already written. There's a couple of extra little bits that we're putting into that bug fix release, and we'll kind of like detail those once we kind of put it up for governance and all that sort of stuff. But there's some kind of like smaller things in there. And so we so that bug fix is definitely coming. So Kane's kind of been working on that, and we're pretty close to having that code complete. So we'll be able to arrange like an audit on that with Sigma Prime. They're usually pretty responsive, but we'll see kind of when that happens, and then we'll schedule that release kind of ASAP. We'll have to do I need to engage the community on what we want to do in terms of the governance side of that rollout of like a patch release. But we'll kind of have a think about that and see what we do about that. But essentially, so that bug fix is on its way. The other thing actually in that bug fix.
Can I just ask a question then before you go on to the next kind of part of that? So, like in your mind, I mean, not holding me to anything, but like in the perfect world, when would you like to see the audits done, and when would you like to see the fix deployed? Are we talking August, September, or September, November? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm thinking like I'd like to release it next month, August, because there's reasoning behind that, and that is that there are actually two other things in there that is related to the voting. So we're trying to figure out how we're going to do it, but we may not be able to turn on the voting system until we release that bug fix. So so that's why I want to kind of try to get that out as soon as possible, so that we can initialize that voting power.
Okay, and then one other follow-up question: you kind of alluded to some additional, maybe either fixes or enhancements in there that you need to communicate to the PDAO. Do you want to share?
One of them is like the quorum. So for the PDAO voting, so it is like, so at the moment the quorum is set to 51%, and that was an oversight really, because it's also, so not only that is, so the value is set to 51%, but also like the safeguard is set to 51%. So in other words, we can't lower it below that without a contract change, which is annoying because that's actually a very high quorum. So to give context, with the snapshot voting, we have a 15% quorum. And that's kind of like manually done, so it wasn't necessarily from mind, but that is that's like a 15% quorum, so we actually want it much lower than 51% to reach quorum. Like we may hit 51% quorum, but we would struggle, I think, to get 51% quorum on every single vote. So we have to change that, so that the PDAO can actually get on-chain votes through. So that's definitely something that we need to do. There's actually also a like a bug bounty that's been raised recently, that we need to also include in that bug fix, and that's around the voting stuff as well. So I'll put out more information on that a little bit later, but yeah, we'll include that in that bug fix.
Oh, excellent. Well, hear that I mean, I suppose not so great to hear that a bug was found again, but great to hear that the bug bountifying those bugs. So I don't know, Hallelujah, if that's you that did it again, but whoever did, congratulations on that. And yeah, that would be great. So I guess even then more urgency to get that it done ASAP and get the bug fix out there sooner rather than later. Then, huh?
Yeah, yeah. No comment on whether it was hallelujah.
Yeah, whomever it was, until they're disclosed. Congratulations on that. But that would be my. Uh, the other thing you mentioned was setting the threshold for a quorum to be a setting that would be PDAO settable, or will it also just be fixed in code as some bare minimum like 15%, or do you envision that to be a variable that the PDAO can vote to change or adjust?
So it is. So it is actually a setting that they can change. The unfortunate thing is, so we put safeguards in place. So each of the PDAO settings that are changed have like a safeguard thing on them, so that they can't. It's mainly so there's two reasons. A, so that if there was any sort of governance attack, they couldn't set the values to something ridiculous. The other thing is probably more like a fat finger sort of thing in case somebody did it by accident as well. So so each of the PDAO settings has a safeguard, and that safeguard is kind of like baked into the smart contract that changes those values. So it means that so although the PDAO can adjust that particular value, they can't adjust it down below 51% because unfortunately we set that too high, as the safeguard too high. So we need to basically redeploy that contract to lower the safeguard.
And while we're on the topic, what do you propose? Like a 10% minimum safeguard, or 15, or what number are you thinking for the PDAO to consider?
Yeah, maybe throw some things in like the governance channel, but I think we're thinking like 10 or 15%, something like that. Definitely 15%, because that's where we are at the moment. I'm not sure whether we'd need to go much lower, but maybe at least 15%, maybe 10% though, if people feel that we need to go that low.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what the conversation is on there. Before we continue on the R&D to the Saturn part, maybe we should just talk vote initialization. So you indicated that really we should not activate the on-chain voting until the patch is deployed in August. But we're still asking for the PDAO members, the node operators, right, to initialize their voting. You want to talk about that and indicate where we are and what number you'd like to see the PDAO get to in terms of initialized voting?
Yeah, so I think we've had a bit of a discussion in the governance thing. There seems to be a little bit of consensus around like 50% of the vote power. We can always see how we progress. That was kind of one of the things I've been kind of a bit open-minded about, where that actually is. But we're really looking at kind of like 50% of the current vote power actually migrating. So what we're on today, so I've got to do like a progress announcement thing, and I haven't run my script today, so I actually don't know where we are at the moment. We were progressing pretty well, so I think last week it was 25% or something like that. So we were progressing pretty well. Yeah, 25%. So we'll have to see where we're at today, and I'll run the thing this morning.
What do you
so
have? You have like a script, your dashboard you run every morning to see where we're at? And
yeah, it's like it's just a script that we have a bunch of scripts that fire through all of the nodes and calculate the vote power, and also calculates things like the RPL locked amount, like how much is kind of like open to doing challenges and that sort of thing, verification. So yeah, so we check those out every now and again. I usually do it every Friday because I've been trying to do an announcement every Friday because it's the future in Australia. So I've been trying to do it every Friday so that I let everyone know what the progress is and give feedback essentially on, keep going, guys. This we're doing really well. So that's the idea.
Yeah, perfect. And yeah, for anyone listening to the call, if you haven't had a chance to initialize your node's voting power, please just take the time to do it, because it's an to know that there's enough governance on the on-chain to turn those powers on. So maybe let's transition a little bit, Langers, if we can, and talk about Saturn, my favorite topic here. Right, I know Houston is important, the bug fix absolutely important, but Saturn is fun and exciting, and it's the new rocket ball. And I saw that you were in the governance thing. There were so many posts in there. I'm used to Hal posting as much, but I had to double check the name, and it was you, and you did the deep dive. You went down the rabbit hole. So tell me what you're thinking, what the team is thinking with Saturn, what are kind of the roadblocks in the near future here with tokenomic design, and when do you think we're going to get these RPIPs out for voting to kind of lock down the tokenomic design? Tell me everything you're thinking about Saturn, please.
Yeah. So actually, there's a few kind of like moving pieces, but over the last few weeks, there've been kind of a bunch of people in the community that have been working extremely hard. Like, they've been working very, very hard, and there's like Long for Wisdom, Valdorf, Samus, Scuzzle, and a few other people as well. They're kind of working on sorry, Epinef as well, yeah. And working hard on drafting, redrafting, and redrafting and redrafting the RPIPs. Doing analysis, engaging in conversation about it. There's a lot of kind of like PRs on the RPIPs to kind of like tweak things and try and get consensus on different elements of things. So there's definitely been a lot of work from that perspective. From the team's perspective, we've been trying to engage in that conversation. Trying to get Kane in there as well, particularly on the more technical things, just like technical feasibility and that sort of stuff. We've had several kind of like full team workshops, pretty much pretty much been all day workshops, going through all of the RPIPs, breaking them down, figuring out whether there's any kind of like feasibility issues, but also trying to give feedback back to the RPIP authors on some of them relate to like technical, some of them are kind of like our opinion, and what we see in terms of the vision and that sort of stuff. So we've been engaging in that conversation. We've been kind of helping to draft those to a certain degree, and and that's been going really well. Like it's been very, very productive. I think we've managed to kind of like shake out a lot of the shake out a lot of the worries or considerations with things that we thought, okay, we need to kind of try and sort this out. So there are a few things that we had that were not we were just mildly concerned about. So we've been talking those through, and I think we've managed to kind of land in a good place in lots of different areas. So that's good. And so I think the RPIPs are definitely in a state where we're getting very, very close to being able to put them in a much wider audience and in a more official kind of capacity. So like I think the idea is there's going to be like a sentiment vote, and so we will put when I say we, I mean like the RPIP authors will put those in front of the PDAO essentially for a sentiment vote, kind of like voting exercise. And then from there, it can then go to vote and all of that sort of stuff. But the first step is that sentiment vote and discussion and making it widely available for the PDAO and trying to make sure that everyone is across what these RPIPs are and how they work. The other thing I've been working on, particularly this week, is providing feedback for the 1KX kind of proposal. So I haven't actually posted much feedback on that yet, but I've been working through it this week to kind of have some feedback, and so I've been going through that at the moment as well. So yeah, it's definitely coming along. That we're making progress, and I think there's some really great discussion, and I think the fact that we've got everyone's got different viewpoints, it's been really good. We've managed to kind of come up with compromises that work really well. Overall, I think the design is a lot stronger because of those compromises, and so yeah, it's looking very good.
Yeah, perfect. And thank you for mentioning the 1KX, because that was also in the biweekly as our next thing. But two follow items here, I guess. One from just a technical notation, from the devs, particularly and the stuff. Were there any roadblocks where the tokenomics design of Saturn would just be infeasible from like a Solidity or EVM point of view? Was there any big red flags other than just the design variables? But I mean, was there any showstoppers or?
You cut out a little bit at the end there, but I get the question. So, no, I mean, there's not really anything like we've still got a long way to go to be honest in terms of the technical breakdown. But none of it seems infeasible from a technical perspective. I think megapools is there's definitely a lot of moving parts in megapools, and I think that's going to be interesting to kind of break down and make sure that we can deliver that properly. But the rest of it, no, the rest of it is there was like one where changing the commission rate, for example, had to kind of try its best to maintain the right commission rate. If you changed it, it had to kind of try to respect the rates. That was a bit tricky to kind of like work through, and so we had a little bit of a workshop or kind of mini session on that. We've had kind of mini sessions on how like the I don't really like the wording of this, but like the forced upgrade of delegates and that sort of thing kind of works. So we've worked on a little bit of we've had mini sessions on that to make sure that we're not painting ourselves into a corner that we can't get out of. And yeah, so I think we definitely had like mini sessions on. We've had large workshops and mini sessions on different aspects to try to make sure that there's not really a problem. I think we've given feedback on whenever there has been one that we know right now. We've given feedback back to the authors so that we can tweak it to make it easier for us, and so that we don't have to tweak it in the future. There will always be unknowns going into kind of like breakdown and development. Breakdown will help it a little bit, but you always have unknowns going into development, and you discover things as you go along. One of the big discussions we had was how does the RPIPs how do the RPIPs develop over time, because it's pretty much inevitable that we will have to make changes to the RPIPs as we go through development, but we want to make sure that we are as aligned with the intent of the RPIP as possible, and we're constantly feeding that back to the community and kind of like making sure that we are on track and in line with the community's expectations on those RPIPs. So that was a big discussion around how we kind of like make sure that happens. But yeah, that's kind of like sorted out to some degree as well. So no, I think we were pretty confident. Most of it is as I said, most of it is relatively easy. I think there's not megapools is probably the only thing where we have anything of like innovative. Because if you the great thing about innovating is you're pushing the boundaries, but also it makes delivery harder because there are more unknowns in doing something innovative. The majority of this stuff is not necessarily innovative. There are definitely set problems to solve in there, but it's not necessarily innovative, so we can work through that quite well. The megapools is the only area where I think we've got a little bit of stuff in there that we that might have a few more unknowns in there. So, but we've spent a bit more time breaking analyzing that up front to make sure that we don't have those things. So, so I think we're in a good place in terms of that.
Okay. This is always the hardest question to ask, right? I guess two questions. One, yeah, you know where I'm going to go, but one easy one, I guess, from you and from the team. Ideally, when would you like to see the tokenomics RPIPs voted and decided? So that's kind of a like, in your point of view, when would you like to see the PDAO say, okay, look, PDAO, I need to know the design spec by this point? And then the harder question for you is, okay, based on everything you know now, and I know there's some variables still out there, but like, what is a realistic expectation for Saturn one, right? Like, I mean, I've heard everybody knowledgeable in the community give me a wide variance of dates. So I'm like, I don't know. The only one that probably has a crystal ball and can make a semi-accurate prediction is probably Langer's. When do you need the tokenomics done by, and when do you think Saturn one comes?
So the tokenomics. So we've got plenty. We got plenty of stuff that's not necessarily controversial, or we that we think will definitely go through to do. But it would be good to have the it would be good to have the tokenomics done within the next like month to 2 months. Month ideally, because then we've got a vision. I think I think from the community perspective, it's probably good that we all decide on which way we're going and what the vision of a rocket pool is going to be as early as possible. I think the thing that's tempering me is I want to make sure that we're we're doing it right. There's been enough thought in everything, and I think that we've definitely that's definitely been happening over the last few months and weeks. So I don't have too much concern in terms of that. But I think it's probably good for the community to have a vision to lock onto quite without too much delay, I guess is the thing. So I would say within the next kind of like month, ideally that we would have to have that, or we would like to have that kind of lockdown, so that everyone's on the same page and that we can kind of like move forward in development and be sure that nothing's going to kind of like move under us. To be fair though, like we've got plenty of stuff to do that we can work on in the meantime. When I say in the meantime, it'd be all Saturn stuff. It's just that we would be it's all Saturn stuff. It's just that it's not necessarily something that is that controversial. So I think we can do that. In terms of the actual timeline itself, that is really hard to answer. In software development, everything can be built in 6 to 8 weeks, because that just seems to be what people say. Saturn can't be built in 6 to 8 weeks. There's absolutely no way. And in the and looking at how long Houston kind of like took to build, we're probably looking at my most optimistic is Q1 next year. And so that would be where I would be targeting. Whether it slips into the beginning of Q2, I don't, it may well do. But at the moment, I would aim for Q1, and then we'll see where we go from there. But it's very, very tricky to tell.
Yeah, well, that's more positive than I think some of the estimations I heard. So yeah, target Q1, but it may slip to early Q2, huh?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking at the moment.
Okay. Okay, excellent. Anything else on Saturn? I know that's always the topic for it, but anything else before we continue with some of the other biweekly items?
No, I think we've covered most of it in. Yeah, no, I think we've covered everything in Saturn.
Okay. A couple other some of the risks of
You're breaking up, Ken, I think.
safeguards. I mean, is that sort of like what we were talking about, that we have these parameter settings that, some of the protocols some of the settings can only change so fast, so quickly, max and minimum limits, or was there other items to that discussion recently?
I missed the beginning of that question. Sorry, what was the beginning of
Oh,
that?
it was about the risks of on-chain governance.
Ah, right. Okay. All right. Cool. Yeah. I mean, the safeguards make it a lot safer, obviously. Just in case anything happens. But yeah. I mean, the system itself. I would say the only risk that I have at the moment is the system itself is quite new, so we want to put it through its paces, which is kind of why we're not necessarily taking our hands off of the PDL Guardian straight away. But once we've so how that rollout will kind of work is once we've initialized the voting, we're going to then run a couple of votes. So the Security Council will probably be the first thing we'll set up, because I think that's probably the most important thing to set up straight away. So we'll set up the Security Council, and then once the Security Council votes and invites and all that sort of stuff is done, then we can focus on like the GMC and IMC stuff. Maybe, I don't know, people might have a different opinion about which one, but more important. But then we'll set up like the recurring payments for GMC and IMC. Once those all of those kind of like proposals are through, we'll have a good kind of comfort that everything's set up. Particularly with the Security Council set up, it means that it's kind of like that they're ready to go. And then so that will give us some bedding time in terms of the proposal system and make sure it's working fine. And then once that's done, then we'll basically schedule handing over the PDL Guardian so that we no longer have that, and it'll be essentially the PDL kind of like going forward. Yeah, I don't necessarily have too many worries about it. I mean, we've gone through, and the design is quite good in the sense that things like spam votes and people kind of like not following the ODAL, so not ODAL, the PDL process and all of this sort of stuff, that's kind of taken care of with the whole vetoing of votes. So that's where basically if people haven't followed the process or they're a spam vote, voters can actually vote against with veto, and it means that their bond is burnt essentially. So the proposer's bond is burnt. So that kind of I'm kind of glad that feature's in place, because it kind of stops a whole heap of stuff that may have occurred if we didn't have that in place. So yeah, no, I'm pretty comfortable with that. It's just basically bedding it in and making sure that it works really well, and yeah, and that there's not any issues with it. That's really the only thing that I'm kind of considering, concerned, whatever.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. For a couple other things in the final governance here, the GMC, which I'm a member of, has opened and it's actually closed now, round 15 of the grants. So the GMC committee was just recently deliberating over the applications for it. And it's kind of in the voting stage by the GMC committee members. And so you should be seeing some decisions on that coming out in a couple of weeks. And for those that aren't familiar, the GMC is the Grants and Management Committee, and it kind of does a round robin where we try to about every month or every 6 weeks open a round for both grants, bounties, and retrospective awards. So, if you want to build on Rocket Pool or seeking some funds to build a project that supports some of the goals and missions of the GMC, definitely apply and look for the next round. It's round 16 that will be opening probably in a few weeks to months time. But definitely you can prepare your application now. And thanks to Vaca that had produced our treasurer, that had produced the PDAO Treasury report. There's a link to it in the bio from Nav. And then that moves us to integration. Our ETH deposits are now eligible for a points program. He's got a link to it in terms of what protocol is out there. And there's now a crypto dashboard that is supporting mini pools on their dashboard here, and provides a link to that too. And I think that dashboard here was crypto financial planning, or iYield is the name of the protocol. I haven't checked them out, but it is always interesting to see the number of portfolio platform tools that do provide you kind of your DeFi assets, and great to see the Rocket Pool node integration, because even with Rocket Pool, that's still a substantial collateral amount that node operators place in your mini pools in order to have that validator. And so it's great to have some of that accounting of that asset on a dashboard. That brings us to kind of our final section here, unless Lanners, you wanted to comment about either of those two.
No, all good. No, they're cool.
Okay, and that brings us to our final one, which is media and marketing here. Kind of an interesting one to start off with. There was another RPL airdrop that was distributed to POAP holders. If you're unfamiliar, the POAP protocol is kind of near and dear to the Rocket Pool community, the proof of attendance protocol. And these series of POAPs, if you were fortunate enough to hold them, were actually not really Rocket Pool, maybe POAPs. These were for individuals that ran testnet nodes during the merge, right? There was a call by the core developers to have people join some test nets so they could try out the merge ahead of time. And some benefactor here has been awarding people that had claimed those POAPs from what was the merge, almost close to 2 years ago or a year and a half ago. And they've been rewarding them with quite a substantial airdrop of RPL tokens for their POAP holding. And obviously they acquired that POAP just as kind of a commemorative thank you, but for their efforts in testing the network. So I think that definitely shows why it is valuable to help during testing. You never know what might happen in a retrospective model here. Mav also included that there's a new listing from another exchange. Obviously, do your own research here, but this one's the Crypto Land Exchange. They've listed RPL on their exchange. So that's good. The more locations in which there's liquidity for RPL trading, the better. But you can check that one out, or you can use your favorite DEX aggregator that incorporates these new exchanges. That's on there. And then last but not least, Mav included an update here for some video content that features some, I think they're kind of how-to videos on rETH integration. This is one that was actually on the call. I think Jasper had him on here. This is flat money. For many of those, you might know JT in the community, right? Big in the ETH finance. I always get it wrong. I think it's ETH finance. I can't always remember which one split from where. But the EVM Mavericks or whatever, JT, everybody knows JT. He did the Rocket School. He's the main on camera talent for Rocket School, but he's been doing a number of educational videos for Flat Money that was on the community call not too long ago, and to illustrate their work, they had chose JT on this thing. I'm sorry, Lingers. Anything you want to cover with the community? I apologize. I'm reading Mav's work and saying your name.
Right, there you go. Just basically, if you there's still kind of like time to engage in the discussions around the tokenomics. Particularly look out for like the sentiment analysis stuff that's coming out. Not sentiment analysis, sentiment poll, and all that sort of thing. Look out for that so that you can kind of get across what's happening with the tokenomics RPIPs, and yeah, so that's definitely something to watch out for. And yeah, so that's not very much more.
Excellent. Okay. Well, we're now here at the end of the top of the hour, so I think maybe we'll call it a wrap to today's community call. But I look very much to joining all the others here on a call in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, Ken. Thank you very much, mate. Always great to chat.
All right. Have a great day.
That's it.